Hey y'all, it's Steffi and welcome back to my channel. So today I wanted to sit and chat with you guys about a question that I got on one of my recent videos. I'm gonna butcher your name, so I apologize. The question comes from Morgushka. Today's video is about whether I feel like the enemy being part of internal audit in my company. So let's jump right into it. Before I dive into the actual topic at hand, I just have to share my disclaimer that these are my own opinions and my own viewpoints based on my personal experiences and my background. Also, these are based on my own experiences within the companies that I have worked for. Everyone's experience is definitely valid, and I'm sure people go through different experiences than what I'm going to share today, so just keep that in mind. But of course, I'm just sharing with you guys based on what I've gone through, and hopefully that will be insightful for y'all. I think going into audit, whether you're external audit or internal audit, you kind of have the expectation of being almost like that police function within a company or you know, in the financial accounting world. Clearly, being part of internal audit or any audit, you have to have a level of independence, meaning that the nature of audit work is testing and assessing whether people are following policies, procedures, controls, if they are performing and doing the due diligence that's required of them for their jobs and in accordance with, you know, accounting standards. When we're talking about like internal audit and external audit. If you're a little bit newer to my channel and you're not quite sure what I'm talking about, I do have videos about what internal audit is, which is what I do now. I am an internal audit manager. I do work for a private company, so please keep that in mind as I share this, and I'll reiterate that as well. I guess the short answer is, personally for myself, I have not felt like an enemy of my company. For background, I have worked in internal audit for two different companies. The first one being earlier in my career as a senior. After like 3 years of experience, I went to a public company and I worked in their internal controls section of internal audit. So that's for a publicly traded company. I specifically focused on, you know, SOX related controls, and that experience was slightly different than what I do now. So now I work for a private company. There's a little bit of a different feeling compared from my public company to what I do in private. I personally have really enjoyed the private internal audit route, and we'll get into that here in a second. I don't feel like in either of those jobs we felt like people didn't want us around kind of thing. I mean, to a degree, okay. Personally have not felt the perception of being an enemy, like in total, and being uncomfortable in total. There are times when you are in the middle of an audit, and if you are finding errors or control deficiencies, or if you're having findings, depending on the person, like the control owner that you are working with, it just depends on the people who you work with who are in the company. I think the biggest factor there is understanding what the company and people in, you know, leadership positions, how they view internal audit. It really is tone at the top. People in management positions of, you know, the organization that you're working with, if they view internal audit as a like tool to improve what they're doing, as a partner in certain aspects, and of course we'll talk more about that, like a partner in a way versus being like that police and that, you know, like how they view external auditors in a way. When you're in industry and you have external auditors, I'm not saying like you're not hiding stuff, that's not it at all, but people can interpret things differently. And of course, if it's like a blatant error, of course, you know, very clear error, that's one thing. But sometimes there are findings that are in more of a gray area. And then you as, you know, a control owner in industry, you're trying to, like, for example, a controller of an accounting department, you're trying to explain to external auditors or show them how it's not like a big issue. With external auditors, they can at times feel like, kind of like you're in interrogation. Not really, but you know, I'm trying to make it, you know, kind of paint the picture where you're trying to like prove your innocence in a way. As an external auditor, I felt more of like being the enemy than I have ever felt like when I'm in internal audit. Again, that really depends on the company culture and how management views and communicates to their people about internal audit, if they share that internal audit is a valuable resource for them to, you know, identify gaps, provide process improvements, streamline something, like if that's the tone that they are setting for their groups, that's when you can get the most value out of internal audit, versus if those people in management positions are like, it's those internal auditors again, they're doing, you know, they're just doing their check the box type stuff. Like, so it really depends on tone at the top and if those control owners have that mindset. And I think to be productive and to have like the best outcome in a company is to view your internal auditors as, you know, that second level of defense before it gets to an external auditor. One thing I definitely suggest if you are interested in going into internal audit, that one of the questions that you ask during your job interview is, how does management view internal audit? You want to be able to start that dialogue with the person who you're interviewing with to understand, is it going to be a value-driven kind of relationship versus like, is it going to be more of like a gotcha kind of relationship, kind of like Dwight whipping open doors? Ask that not only to people in internal audit, but if you do interview with people like in the accounting department, then ask them as well. Another big part of being in audit is being able to build professional relationships and building rapport. You'll hear that a lot, especially when you're in external audit, about building rapport with a client. And that's just basically having a good, productive working relationship with your client. And so me in internal audit, building relationships with people in other departments, you know, not necessarily being like buddy-buddy with everyone, because again, there's that fine line of independence. Sometimes though, you do click with people and you become like closer friends with people, and that's very common, especially when you're at work, relate to similar things that are going on in your work environment. So it is partially building rapport, you know, getting to know people kind of more on a personal basis so that they feel more open and more open to discussing things, you know, with you. Of course, being very clear, you know, about that professional line. Like, you have to kind of be careful though, because if that person is someone who you will be performing an audit on, like if you're going to be evaluating them and their tasks, you just have to be really careful about the types of relationships, working relationships that you build with people. And also to be very clear about, like, if we are friends, you know, our friendship is a personal thing versus when we're at work, strictly work, professional, like focused. I think it is very important to, like I said, build that rapport, talking to people more than just whenever you're asking them for something. It's a little bit easier back in the day when we were back in the office, but you know, that small talk, seeing someone in the break room, little things like that can help build rapport versus it always just being like they only contact you when you're auditing them, you know? Thirdly, hopefully by sharing this next part, it'll be helpful for people who are on the opposite end of the table, you know, like people who are in the actual accounting department, controllers and stuff. If this is you, then hopefully this will be some helpful food for thought. I'm grateful that the company that I work for, we have a good relationship with our control owners, and they know that we are there as a resource for them, and specifically as a resource to be, like I said, that second level of defense before something goes to external audit, before something is identified by them and there's no time to remediate it versus us finding it first, and then there being time to fix that, you know, whatever that issue is. We're still independent, but there are opportunities for us to be quote unquote like a business partner consultant, only in instances where it's like maybe they are redesigning a process or implementing a new system or something like that, and they want that expertise from an audit person to share, like, you know, what should we be thinking about in terms of risk, about what types of controls to, you know, implement and to kind of build into the framework while something is being designed, and to have us be involved in the front end versus them doing it, not really having that expertise from that viewpoint, and then by the time it gets implemented and we're testing it, it's like, oh, we all missed all this stuff. It can be helpful in that regard. There's a very hard delineation between being a consultant. Ultimately, what we do is provide recommendations. At the end of the day, management has to own that and make those decisions. We can be there to provide that expertise from a risk control process side. So once that gets implemented and there's specific policies, procedures, and controls in place, at that point we're no longer your consultant business partner type thing. At that point, we are definitely auditors, testing against those policies, procedures, and controls. As auditors, you're not making decisions on behalf of management. And again, you have to be that independent kind of person to provide that independent feedback to the governing board of either audit committee. So I've been happy in my current role in internal audit for that reason. And also, like, when you become a kind of like a trusted person in your organization, you can kind of tell once people start coming to you and are like open about the issues that they're having in processes or controls, or if something does end up failing and they have seen it, like pulling you in as a resource to go through the root cause analysis and work through remediation plans. Part of it is us identifying things before before an external audit begins, because like I said, you have time to remediate things and make sure that your financials are materially correct and accurate, and that any deficiencies, SDs, MWs, whatever, have been remediated before the external audit. Having something like that in your final audit opinion can have repercussions, in other things like debt covenants, perception by the public, if a publicly traded client or something like that, knowing that you have the expertise in certain areas and that you have like that visibility to piece things together from different departments and different processes. So of course, I'm not saying that everyone is super happy to see internal audit or to have to go through audits to make the working environment tolerable and enjoyable, versus it being kind of like a really tense situation. Audits are just a part of the business world, and being able to be involved in them in a productive, constructive way, versus it being like a I'm just trying to find all the bad things or all the things that y'all have done wrong or whatever. So it just depends on the approach by you as the auditor, and then of course by management. Another thing about internal audit, there are times when processes or controls need to be improved because of different things, changes to the business, new systems. Many times, like, people who are in the company, like people who are actually in the accounting department, sometimes they don't have the capacity, the bandwidth to really fully think through all of the different variables and piece things together and look at things more like at a high level or detail level. Sometimes they just don't have the bandwidth to dig into something in the way that an internal auditor can, because that's our job. So that's one of the reasons why it's nice if management sees internal audit more as like a tool or as a valuable source of expertise. You can get a lot of value out of people who are in your company versus having to hire someone out like a contractor or something like that. Of course, if internal auditors have that bandwidth. Anyways, I keep going on tangents. So basically, to answer it, no, I don't personally feel like I'm an enemy of my company, and I don't feel like I'm not uncomfortable. I don't feel like I don't belong. But again, a lot of that has to do with my company's culture and the people, the tone at the top, and the control owners that I work with, and of course me and my team building good relationships with them as well. So that is really going to be the biggest variable on whether internal audit is perceived as an enemy or not. I hope that kind of gave you some insight on what it's like to be an internal audit and the feeling that I have with regard to my company and my interactions with people. Happy to chat more about any of these topics or any pieces in this video more if you would like. I hope this video was helpful. If it was, please be sure to give it a thumbs up. I would greatly appreciate it. Stay safe, stay healthy, and stay positive, and I'll talk to y'all in my next video. So, I think, now, duties are operational. That was juicy, sorry. I'm not explaining it very well, am I? Oh, let me chat about that in a second. Secondly to that, I think it's really important to, so stuff like that. It also is kind of, it becomes kind of, it, for me, anyway, that's, yeah, let me think what else. sometimes I really don't understand her because she was just like standing up, scratching at her playpen and everything, and then as soon as I open the playpen, she's fine. Silly.